everyone. I'm Lawrence Berg. I'm a professor of critical geography here at UBC. I'm a member of ICER. Okay, so today we've got a discussion. We're going to have some presentations from folks, but hopefully it'll be a wider discussion that will develop. Sorry, there's a few things going on here. So we're going to have presentations from Rebecca Sandover, Dr. Rebecca Sandover from the University of Exeter, who's a guest here and has been touring around and meeting various actors in food networks and food security and food justice systems in the Okanagan. We'll have a presentation from Andy Johnson. Is Andy presenting? Yes. But we'll have it here on the system, right? Okay, great. That's going to be strange for Andy, so good luck, Andy. We'll have a presentation from Eva-Lena Lang, who's with Organic BC. Eva-Lena, could you put your hand up? Liz Blakeway from Land to Table, and Dr. Mary Stockdale from UBC Okanagan and various other institutions as well. Here it just says UBC Okanagan, but you're with a bunch. So we'll start now, and I will just do this. I'll put my phone up so that you know I'm not just waving or something if there's a problem with time, like, or if there's anything, just so you see me. And I'm going to be sitting here facing you, putting my camera on you, I think. What's that?
Little countdown for like 3 minutes to go.
Oh, yeah. That would be the 3 minutes, and then the next one would be 2 minutes. But I don't think we're going to have to worry about time anyways. So I just need to figure out how we're going to do this. I'm going to shift it onto you and put the microphone closest to you.
Yeah, and I'm going to share my screen.
Okay, so if you could just talk.
Hi, I hope you can hear me okay. Looking forward to sharing my presentation.
Okay, what the heck's happened here? Why is...
Great. Oh, okay, anyone can do a little thumbs up again. Thank you, just to say you can hear me okay. Thank you so much. So yeah, my name's Dr. Rebecca Sandover. I'm from the University of Exeter in Devon, which is in the southwest of the UK. And I'm really, really delighted to be here to talk to you today. And thank you so much to John and Mary and Land to Table and everyone and Lawrence who've welcomed me here. It's been great so far, and I've really enjoyed meeting everyone. So I'm going to talk about place-based networks for food sustainability in a time of emergencies. It's a very brief talk, and I'm looking forward to having more to say in the discussion as well. So thank you. If you could, next slide, please. So yeah, just here to give a quick outline of what I'm going to be talking about. So I'm very interested in food networks and the importance of multi-level governance in shaping governance at different scales, and I'll come on to that in a moment. And I'm also putting this in the context of our a time of multiple emergencies, which I'm sure many people are already aware of, and in particular the declaration of climate emergencies. So I'll also be talking about co-producing knowledges for change and the importance of centering equality, although unfortunately I don't have a huge amount of time for that, but I will, hopefully we'll come back to that in the discussion as well. Yeah, next slide, please. Great, thank you. So a consideration of sustainable food wicked issues in the UK brings a focus on intersecting debates relating to land use, food distribution, community-based innovation, social justice, amongst others. For decades, there's been a food policy vacuum in England, whilst more progressive policy action has been taking place in the devolved nations of Scotland and Wales. Within this context, place-based community groups have been self-organising and connecting with different national organisations whose campaigns overlap to form interconnected food networks. These food networks focus on critical food issues such as sustainable local food supply chains, access to sustainable local food, household food insecurity, and more. And these networks intersect at a place-based scale where locally acting communities take forward programs of work to enact local food change, whilst also linking to campaigns of national and trans-local networks and frameworks. Next slide, thanks. So yeah, just a very quick link to run through some of the stats that may be familiar to you. Linking to the importance of the climate change crisis, food is responsible for approximately 26% of global greenhouse gas emissions, with the most serious environmental impacts from food occurring at the beginning of the supply chain by the practices of food producers. But it's argued that households influence these impacts through dietary choices and shopping habits. Whilst the conventional global food supply model creates a lot of economic efficiencies, it can be said to create significant sustainability impacts that remain invisible to the consumer. This is known as creating negative externalities that aren't included in the cost of food, such as degraded land, polluted watercourses, squeezing rural livelihoods and rural communities, and driving the mass consumption of high-calorie, low-value food products. But as the Eat to Lancet reports say, food can be seen as a significant lever to optimise human health and environmental sustainability on Earth. Therefore, this provides an opportunity to explore climate change through the lens of food. Great, so next slide, thanks. So this slide just gives a very brief overview of some of the existing action that's been going on in the UK. The National Food Strategy by Henry Dimbleby was commissioned by the UK government in 2019 as the first independent review of the government's food policy in nearly 3/4 of a century. Its aim was to provide a roadmap for transforming the food system from its current state to one that is healthier for the population and the planet. It has produced a range of recommendations that covers issues of land use, farmer payments, access to food, holiday hunger, and more. However, the UK government produced recently a food policy white paper, and it seemed to have fallen short of the aims of the National Food Strategy, although it does include some useful elements, including a commitment to a land use strategy by 2023. And you can see here from the National Food Strategy, the map of the UK, that we are overshooting on the land that's needed to supply food for the nation. It also includes a consultation on public food procurement with the goal of 50% of local or higher standard food, which I'm really excited to talk to colleagues here because they've been doing some great work on that already. Next slide. So place-based food initiatives are commonly working for an alternative to agri-industrial global supply chains. By being place-based, they are often embedded and have richer understandings of their communities and the landscapes that they operate in. Place-based food organisations are often made up of innovators, people with a passion for biodiverse landscapes and a passion for well-fed communities, and to ensure healthy, sustainable food is accessible for all. Place-based food initiatives are coordinated at wider scales in the UK by nationally operating organisations such as the Sustainable Food Places, the Food Power Alliance, Feeding Britain projects, and others. These interconnected networks act as an increasingly important mechanism to link food actors, community-based organisations, and communities and policymakers in addressing the critical issues faced by communities in the UK and elsewhere. Place-based food initiatives working at a community scale are also concerned with issues of household insecurity, household food insecurity, access to fresh food, diet-related ill health, promoting sustainable diets and boosting community food resilience and more. By being linked to national and transnationally operating networks, place-based organisations are able to benefit from peer learning practices and other processes of knowledge exchange and collaboration with some local and regional policymakers. Some work in collaboration with local and regional policymakers, whereas others are more independent. Notwithstanding the levels of connection with policymakers at the local scale, these interconnected networks link community organisations and others with national actors working for food policy change. As already mentioned, the existing food system is accelerating issues of climate change and biodiversity loss, along with health crises. As it's based on neoliberal economics, there is a lack of regulation of industry. This drives the need for place-based food organising advocacy campaigns for change. Local food initiatives have proven themselves to be innovative, adaptable, and creative in a time of crisis. However, a longer-term flourishing of the local food economy will require more than the dedication and ingenuity of local food leaders. In her book, Setopia, Carolyn Steele calls for a redesigning of the local food market in collaboration with local authorities who have the ability to support the local food economy via policy and planning. Next slide. As explored by Moragas Foe 2020, there are limitations to place-based food organisations. It's easy to laud the local as a place of care for people and planet, but there are many challenges to place-based food action and the potential for exclusion and inequitable relations to prosper at the local level as well as the global scale. The quote on the slide from Moragas Foe 2020 highlights the tensions that exist within the food movement between those working to boost the local food economy and those more focused on equal access to food. Wider scale food networks such as the Sustainable Food Places, the Milan Urban Food Policy Pact, Food Policy Councils, La Via Campesina, etc., have the capacity to not only build capacity in the food movement, but also to advocate for equality, diversity, and food justice to be given prominence. Through this approach, food organisations need to ensure they avoid operating within silos and work for inclusive and equitable approach to food policy change. Next slide, please. So co-producing processes that ensure all voices are included in the formation of strategies for action for change are important in addressing these issues of potential exclusion. Advocacy actors, including academics, can deploy co-production processes to address the challenge of achieving both policy change whilst also working for effective community programmes that support access to food, food education, and supporting the local food economy. Next slide, please. So co-production, I have a quote here, I hope I'm doing okay for time. Co-production is a process, this is from a paper I wrote in 2020, is a process that acknowledges the situated context within which knowledge is generated and the impacts of these situations on the actors generating knowledge. In particular, a co-production approach recognises place-specific governance, the economic, environmental and social atmospheres that shape the issues affecting communities, the abilities for communities to self-organise, the work to influence decision makers and more. So next slide, please. So now I'm very, very briefly going to introduce some insights on action for policy and programme change in Devon. So in 2019, the Devon Sustainable Food Networks project was formed in response to a wealth of place-based food initiatives seeking to address issues relating to sustainable food in Devon. It was a collaboration between myself, Food Exeter, Food Plymouth, the Bioregional Learning Centre and Public Health Devon, with the aim to start a conversation around these issues, share data on each other's activities, and explore how best to join up currently siloed initiatives. Next slide, please. There are wealth and life expectancy disparities across Devon, including the 13.7-year gap between the ward with the shortest life expectancy, which is Ilfracombe Central, and the longest at Chagford. Devon's natural resources are also seen as challenges in terms of creating rural-urban linkages that assist the supply of local food. Plus, Devon's economy is constrained by low wages and seasonal employment. A combination of these challenges can result in our high-quality food produce being transported to London, where they get premium price instead of being supplied locally. This map from Public Health Devon highlights the indices of multiple deprivation in Devon, showing hotspots of deprivation in Exeter, Plymouth, Torbay, and also in North Devon. Next slide, please. So this map came out of that project, and it shows the interconnectedness of the 4 Devon-based partners. The map was created using software that takes a social network analysis approach to visualizing data. It was a very simple data set, and so we have 4 similarly sized clusters of networks coalescing around each partner, and it helps to illustrate their connections. So this helps us to understand better the linkages between partners, and whilst there are discrete partner networks, we can see that they're largely interconnected, both through proximity to each other in some instances, and also through linkages to national organisations. Thanks. Next slide, please. So these are my conclusions, so I may be ahead of time. The declarations of climate emergencies internationally in 2019 from national and local authorities and other key institutions are a positive step forward in recognising the climate crisis. However, urgent strategic action is needed from policymakers at local, regional and national levels. Progressive strategic action at all scales need to take an integrated approach to policymaking by recognising the multi-issue, multi-sector challenges of food, including food insecurity and access to food, the environment, education and health. In response to the slow progress in joined-up strategic action, place-based food initiatives are taking action, resulting in innovation at local, place-based and regional scales. Working with local authorities, key decision makers and regional bodies, food networks support place-based stakeholders to realise the goal of transforming local and regional food systems. Developing regional sustainable food plans has the potential to build capacity in regional food systems and develop opportunities to increase the supply and sale of sustainable local food and support the procurement of local sustainable food by public bodies and anchor institutions. Through these network actions of network formation and co-producing knowledges, food networks can work to influence and implement locally adapted programs and policies that can enact food change. Thank you very much. I've got one slide with my thanks as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That was wonderful. Okay, I'll try and manage questions from here.
I'm on.
Hello.
That's
Hi, Andy.
Hi there.
Do you want to do some questions now,
yeah,
or?
yeah, I don't mind.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's do some questions. If people could use the reaction. Great. Okay. Anyone have a question? I don't see a hand up anywhere. Okay, well, maybe I'll start off. I have a question. It's really, you won't know the answer, obviously, but it's something that obviously is on a lot of people's minds in the UK, that the effing Tories are at it again, right? And they've just elected as their leader a person who's going to make more bodies surplus and kill more people. I'm just wondering, I'm assuming there's a lot of resilience in these community organizations, but they must have to organize against this kind of stuff too, locally.
Yeah, I mean, I'm hoping that's part of the message I'm hoping to have got across, is that although there's a lot of, I recognise the value, the richness, the passion and the enthusiasm for that place-based organisers are producing. And I really welcome that and celebrate that. But it is in the context of having to do that within the context of a policy vacuum. So, yeah, that will probably carry on. I imagine the policy vacuum. There is a serious concern with the new trade treaties with like Australia. We're having mixed messages. On one side, there's a message that we value local, regional, high quality, high welfare food, because welfare is a huge something that we excel at, welfare for farm animals in the UK. But on the other side, there's the Australian treaty that will probably undermine all of that. So there is a huge, worry, but unfortunately this is just business as usual for the advocacy actors as well, because we've been here for a while. And I suppose the concern is the levels of funding. How will the levels of funding continue? We've got, like I've mentioned, we've got national organising networks, and it's really crucial that they continue to be funded, because they are the link to support all these more place-based actors.
It's, I don't know if you heard that the Levelling Up Fund, more money was spent in the southeast than in the northeast. It was awarded to the richest part of the country at a higher rate. Anyone? Okay, great. There's a question there. Okay, sorry. I don't know your name because it just says FFCF board.
That's Linda.
Linda.
No, Andrea. Yeah, sorry, I've come on with my board hat on instead of my other hats. My question, right near the top, Rebecca, you mentioned a phrase called centering equality. And in our community, we know, I mean, across Canada, but specifically in the Okanagan and the North Okanagan where I reside, when we look at what that means, we've got an Indigenous population who is the highest risk on the health and food insecurity. And the work that we've been doing in food systems is trying to engage partners within the Indigenous community. They often don't have the capacity for that. So how do you, where you're looking at putting equality at the center of those networks, how do you engage those who do not have the resources to participate?
That is absolutely a crucial question and a fundamental question, and it's one I don't have an answer to, only that it's being more and more recognised by the national networks, the Sustainable Food Places, the Food Power Alliance, etc. And Food Power ran a campaign trying to and funding people with lived experience to join, to work more closely with the food movement. So joining steering groups of place-based food organisations. I met, I think the Oxford Food Network were successful in that, in bringing in sort of people with lived experience onto the steering group, but it isn't commonly happening, and it's something I've talked a lot about in Devon. And with all the crises and the emergencies and the critical action, it keeps slipping down the priority list. So I think it does take people like us to keep raising this as a really essential issue to try and bring people with lived experiences onto steering committees, hopefully, and to bring into conversation. It isn't easy because, as you say, people who are experiencing multiple disadvantage don't have the capacity, perhaps. They don't have the time. They've got other critical challenges in their lives. So it is a challenge, but I was very inspired by the work of Food Power over the last few years, especially the work they did up in Newcastle, and their work with young people with lived experience, real advocates. And I'm hoping that we can carry on learning from those sort of networks and drive this forward. Yeah.
Great. Okay, anyone else? I don't.
Yeah, one other question.
One,
Top left.
go for it. Patricia?
Yes, thank you. And thank you, Rebecca, for your presentation. Very interesting and good to hear what's happening in your place. I have two questions. First, can you put info about your access to more information about your network analysis into the chat, perhaps? Or we're planning a network analysis here, and it'd be very helpful to see how you did yours and how it answered your questions that you may have been posing. Just to be back up a bit, I'm working on a collaboration across food businesses and food organizations, community-based food organizations on the southern west coast of Canada, so in the capital region of BC. The other question I have is, have you done a capacity assessment in your area that includes your food producing capacity, not just built environment, but ecological and environmental production capacity, and then of course your built environment and your governance capacity as well? Have you done such an assessment that perhaps we could have a look at as well?
Yeah, that is a good question, and it's a really important thing to map our resources and our capacities. I personally haven't done that work, but I know colleagues in the food movement have done similar work. There was work on the Totnes food shed that tried to map how much land was needed to feed the whole of Totnes. And I think the Bristol Food Network have done a similar mapping project to try and get a sense of how much land is needed if you wanted to be more self-sufficient in a community. I don't think we've done that exactly in Devon as a whole. I don't think that work has happened, well, not that I'm aware of, but our next speaker, Andy, is going to give some really good insights into the food production side of things in Devon. So his talk will hopefully just illustrate some more around sort of local food production in Devon. And yeah, I'm happy to connect perhaps by email. It might be great if someone could put my email in the chat. I haven't got access to the chat at the moment. If someone could put my email in the chat, I'd be happy to.
Joanne is going to do that.
To follow up that question about the social network analysis. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you for your question. Because we were fooling around at the beginning, we kind of a little bit behind schedule. We shouldn't be sticking to it completely, but we're at 9:05, so I think we should move on to our next speaker, Andy.
Hello everyone. Hopefully you can see that. So
yes, we can see.
Brilliant, thank you. I'm down in Devon, in the UK. Andy Johnson, that's the name. I'm working as a freelance organic advisor, and I've been working with Food Exeter on this project for a couple of years. How do we make organic local food more achievable with the intention of feeding more people? and really that means building a market for that food, and farmers will follow. That's the principle. I come from the farming side. I've worked in agriculture all my life, have been a farmer, and now spend my life advising and helping farmers find markets. And overall in the UK, just a bit of background, organic food only accounts for about 3%, or slightly less than 3% of grocery sales, and local and organic is even less. I mean, there are people doing it on, you know, it's not like we're inventing something that's, it's just doing it on a new scale, really. Next slide, please. Thank you. So the Exeter retail food landscape is dominated by two large, by the national supermarkets, and that's a combination of superstores and local convenience stores. Throughout the city, we've got very few indie retailers where you might be able to go and buy a local organic cauliflower. There are two local box schemes, both supplying the city, and people are happy with that, but it's not reaching very many of the public. The well-off and the well-informed tend to be their main clients, I imagine. And also the city council and charities, as Rebecca indicated, you know, there's quite a lot of support going on in the city with food banks, and anecdotally, certainly for fresh food, demand is outstripping supply as food businesses are cutting down on the waste that they're producing, and demand is rising in the food banks. I'm sure it's the same across the pond. Other thing we know is that there was a recent report, I don't know who saw that, it was maybe just over in the UK, but they estimate the environmental impacts of 57,000 food products and showed quite a lot of correlation between the nutritional value and the environmental impact to that food. You know, with things with low nutritional value also having quite a high environmental impact, and products that had a good environmental impact also had high nutritional value, but they tend to be more expensive. And I'm taking it as a given that local organic food is a social good. I'm going to just state that and move on. I hope you can all, you know, Rebecca's done a lot of work on why it's better. I'm saying it is just for the purposes of this. And do this, produce local organic food, sell it at the, you know, across the community, and good things will happen. At the moment, supermarkets in the UK, certainly, it's not true in all of Europe, they sell organic produce as a high-end, you know, aspirational product, and as a consequence move low volume, using convoluted supply chains, and they add a lot of cost and little value, and these would be reduced if organic food had a larger share of the market, and if supply distance was shorter, because transport matters suddenly, then prices would be even lower. And also throw in that Devon has got the largest number of organic producers in the UK. Unfortunately, very few of them are connected to local supply lines. They tend to work out through national wholesalers or have their own distribution network. So in order to get the scale that they need in their business, they've had to look at the whole of England, principally London and Bristol, I would imagine, to grow their business so they can build the infrastructure to stay in business. So next slide. And also, this suddenly we've got this new thing that costs are rising at the farm gate. I haven't done the analysis, and I'm doing a talk in October, and I want to do some analysis on how the costs have gone up for an organic farmer versus a non-organic farmer. And I think they've gone up more for non-organic farmers, with the price of fertilizer tripling. The price of labour in farms is up around between 5 and 10%. I know of, you know, it's even more than that in some vegetable harvesting. Packaging's up about 10, and we need ex-farm prices to rise just at a time when people need cheaper food. And there's anecdotal evidence that I'm hearing is through box schemes and people, is that shoppers had started to tighten their belt, presumably in readiness for a very expensive winter of heat and power, where maybe a third of their take-home income is going to go on heating their houses. We've got a real problem here. And fresh food particularly is feeling the squeeze. Markets are quite quiet still. It is summer. People have gone away a lot more this summer than last because they're not locked down anymore. There's always a worry when you're an organic box scheme that will your customers come back in September when the schools go back, and they always do. But we're all a little bit worried down here. And on top of that, we've had a summer drought. There's a lot of livestock and not that much feed in the sheds. It started raining again, so we might get some more silage in October, but I can see quite a lot of destocking, which will put more meat will possibly be cheaper in the next 2 or 3 months as a result, but then the gap will be after Christmas. And as a result of the drought, winter veg is also compromised. So ex-farm prices will rise, maybe not in the short term because of, people having to get rid of crops or animals that they can't feed. But yeah, unfortunately, nothing is joined up. Next slide, please. As Rebecca said, there's a huge number of actors working away in this marketplace, if you like. But they're all independent. There's even competition between different groups. And I found in my work with research for the Exeter project that it's been, you suddenly discover that someone has been doing the work that you're desperately trying to find. But they haven't told us because we don't talk to them. That needs joining up, and food goes through many government departments in local councils and national government. But we have DEFRA, which is responsible for food, and yet food is also a big part of public health, and it's a poverty issue. But also, according to the National Food Strategy that came out last year, that Henry Dimbleby did, it's seen as a middle order priority for the English government, although it's becoming increasingly political, as we know. Next slide, please. So what are we to do? I said before, organic food locally grown is a social good. How can we increase the supply? So we set about, when I did the work for Food Exeter, in answer to the earlier question, I've done a bit of analysis using retail figures. What scale would we need to be at to be large enough at farm level to achieve most of the low-hanging efficiencies? So, for example, that someone growing 40 hectares of potatoes can afford all the equipment: the destoner, the ridger, the harvester, the storage, the grader, and run a 52-week business on potatoes. But any less than that, and you can't quite justify the spending. So get the first efficiencies at farm level. That's what we're aiming for. How big would that market need to be to have 100 acres of potatoes, and as a result feed a larger proportion of the city with best value organic groceries across all settings? That's in the home and out of the home. Build a business large enough so it's got the economies of scale in distribution, and also deliver sustainable returns to suppliers and provide food at a reasonable price to shoppers. So I got some good figures from 2019 of what the average household in the UK spends on food, broken down across all the categories. I took 70,000 homes, which was the number I could see in central Exeter that we could reach quite easily. And if 20% of those homes bought our food, that would equate to a retail spend of about £60 million. And it would use 2,500 hectares of organic land. So I did quite a lot of maths on the number of cows, the number of chickens. It's 11,000 laying hens, for example. I remember that one. And then using a local multiplier. Now, this is new work, where £1 spent on local food bought in a local shop, that £1 that you spend creates £2.50 in the local economy by the time it's all rattled through, as opposed to the supermarket system, which you spend your £1 and 60 or 70 pence of it goes outside of the area straight away. So it's a drain. The supermarket system is a drain on a local economy, and we want to put in something that's got keeps some money within. And if you take that multiplier on that £60 million of £2.50 per pound spent, the community chest value, I like to call it, is worth 150 million. There's obviously some work to be done on whether that's real money or not, but evidence says that local money is retained longer. So next slide, please. So we set about, if we had 20% of the market, how much land, we know how much land that would take, we know how many farmers that would be. Next slide, please.
It's 3 minutes, Andy.
Lovely, thank you. So I came up with this pretty brutalist diagram there of what our hub needs to do, is to take food from small holdings and farms and makers and bakers. We've, as I said, we've got a huge number of organic producers down in Devon. It's the largest in the country, and our hub would take the produce. Doesn't necessarily need to handle it. It needs to handle, possibly needs to handle the sale only if the farmer can deliver it straight to the customer. And our market is a combination of retail, which, as I said earlier, there aren't many places in Exeter that would sell it at the moment. So have we got to build shops? Have we got to, or can we work with the supermarkets? That debate is currently happening within our little group. We've been supplying public and private catering, processing markets, and that's quite an important one. When we get a surplus of product, to take it off the market, chop it up, put it in the freezer, put it in jars, preserve it, and sell it later on, because we're looking for 12-month business, and England isn't going to be able to supply most things most of the year. Supplying other hubs in the network would be a principal market for us, and then also selling into other markets. So if we produce more than we need to find other markets to keep all these farmers happy. Next slide, please. Thank you. So where are we with the market versus the supply? It's as far as we're concerned, we've got 4 or 5 farmers at the moment. We've got about 1,000 acres of organic land available, and farmers are in touch saying, what do you want us to grow next year? So put supply to one side. I need a market for them before I'm going to ask them to grow anything. All farmers in the UK are considering their future. Their average age, I think, of UK farmers is still 59. It doesn't seem to go up much, but it ain't coming down. Although a lot of young people do want to farm, separate subject, but if you give them some land and somewhere to live cheaply, they'll get on and farm. The recent trade deals that Rebecca alluded to and government support, there's no commitment beyond 2027, I think, for the old EU payments to run out. And farmers are, if they can see a secure looking market, they tend to invest in it and will supply it. But the market needs to come first. And how do we make that market? Is principally by filling the basket one item at a time. We can't hit the ground with every product. And if we do get going, that market needs to grow at 25% per year to take us to 20% of the entire market by 2030. And we need to put infrastructure in place at the time it's needed. So really good planning, and program our suppliers to grow what we think we can sell. So where, next slide, please.
1 minute.
And right now we've decided to set up a delivery company that's going to deliver the project. Not necessarily, it won't be the co-op that supplies the vegetables. It'll help set up a co-op, but this thing is quite big. We're setting up a new network, and the delivery company needs to be able to work across all of it, not just the growing and the selling, but also, you know, it dealing with government policy, all that sort of stuff. We need to raise finance to employ planner and build the market product by product. This winter in particular, keep an eye open for market opportunities. We've had empty shelves in the UK for the last 2 years, partly COVID and now supply. And there may be opportunities for us to step in. There is spare vegetables in the area, we do know that. We want to establish a prepping and preserving business. We want to establish a farmer-owned supply co-op, possibly a consumer-owned retail business in the absence of anywhere else to sell. Collaborate with councils and charities in the current distribution networks, build our brands with our values buried in them, and more market research is needed to work out the key market segments, and then put a value on this community chest, so that if you go and buy the right food that adds £1 into the community chest, you can see other people are doing it as well. And rather than bullying people into changing their diets, we're going to have to reward them by making them feel other people are doing it too. And there we go. That's the end of my. There is one more slide, but it says thank you. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that, Andy. Pop that off. We've got time for one question.
Ooh. Who's asking?
Hi, Andy. It's Liz from Atlantic Table. We were remarking as you were speaking about the similarities here, but also wondering if this was, like, as a consultant, if this was your own personal work or if this was Food Exeter work, like this analysis that you've done, and if it was something that you could share.
Yeah, it's Food Exeter. They've paid me to do it. It's theirs. So ask Rebecca.
Okay.
Can I ask a quick question as well?
Yeah, go for it.
Thanks so much for that, Andy. That was excellent. One of the things that I was sort of intrigued, having not really heard from either you or Rebecca about, but how significant has Brexit been, particularly around, removal of things like the Common Agricultural Policy, perhaps the inclusion of things like tariff on agricultural crops? Like, is this something that factors into, the sort of near future of food justice and access to food in Exeter?
Do you know, I don't feel that much impact from it, to be honest. So there is demand for UK produce more than there was 5 years ago, I would say. So if you're looking at flowers and foliage, which is one of my customers grows, sold nothing for 30 years of eucalyptus and pittosporum, and suddenly people are asking for florists for English flowers. And so there's a bit more awareness, I think, coming through now. Whether that's Brexit or whether that's just the times we live in, I don't know. And the sudden prices of everything changing that's the biggest effect, I think, is the supply changes that we've had, and the cost of living is bigger than Brexit. But Brexit is a bastard. Sorry.
I suppose the critical thing is that, will small scale organic agriculture be able to fill the gaps which are obviously, currently, affecting access to food? Anyway, that's a much bigger question. I know Rebecca's got something to say on this as well, quickly.
Yeah, that's a great question as well. I haven't looked at this in depth. I did look at it back in 2017, but from what I've heard, there has been a huge impact on the increase in paperwork on crossing the border. So I think that has led to huge costs and challenges in the supply chain. We obviously had a very difficult, because of COVID, I can't remember which year, was it 2020? I think it was 2020, the beginning of 2020. Were huge supply chain issues after Brexit was fully implemented. So I think it is, but I think just we've been swamped by so many other crises, it's kind of been able to be swept slightly under the carpet. But I think it's there, and I'm sure there's colleagues doing research onto it.
There was a report in The Guardian just this week saying $32 billion cut in GDP because of Brexit. Yeah, significant.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, Andy.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, next up we have Eva-Lena from BC Organics. Let's see if I'm getting you there.
We'll do our questions at the end.
Okay, yeah. So you're just going to do the three in a row, and okay. So just for people who might not have heard that, the three presenters are going to present all in a row. We're not going to have questions until the end. So write your questions down.
Thank you. Good morning and afternoon. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge we are on the traditional unceded territory of the Okanagan Silk people. I would also like to acknowledge the Splatsin and Okanagan Indian bands directly contributed to the work I did during my master's and continue to work closely with Land to Table. Thank you for being here today and for giving me the opportunity to speak with my colleagues and friends. The beginnings of Land to Table was a passion project from a few dedicated people, and it led to a community of its own. Today I'm going to tell you a story about how a regional food system network was formed and how I came to do my research on it. Liz will share the actions, successes, challenges, and lessons learned of Land to Table, and Mary will follow up with the co-production piece, where how the university partnered with Land to Table to help build the network and help support the activities and some of the lessons learned from that. And as Lawrence mentioned, we'll take questions after the three of us have spoken. Our work takes place, I forgot, next slide, please. Oh, no, back. Thank you. Our work takes place in the regional district of the North Okanagan. It is located in the Okanagan Valley, which is in the southern interior of BC. And I see, because of the Google Drive formatting has changed, so I apologize. That's supposed to be already a no. This region is well known for its tourism, lakes, orchards, and vineyards. Agriculture is one of the main economic drivers in the North Okanagan. A lot of farming here is small scale and marginal due to the mountainous terrain. The region produces a diverse range of agricultural products, including meat, dairy, forage, fruits, and vegetables. So I'm Eva-Lena Leng, and I am the Executive Director of Organic BC. I've been in this role for just over 2 years now, and I grew up on an organic family farm here in the North Okanagan. I've worked on various types of farms in the region and in Europe, volunteered within food systems organizations, and have been closely involved with the development of the Land to Table network. I completed my community engaged master's at UBCO just over 2 years ago with a focus on building regional food system networks. My experiences in and observations of the food system led me to pursue the work I am doing today. North Okanagan food system actors and consumers face numerous challenges, and there is a need to reduce silos. Some of the challenges and barriers include regulatory barriers, especially for small-scale producers, lack of processing, aggregation, and distribution, significant climate change impacts. Sorry, I have very few slides, so I'll let you know. And access to affordable land, an aging farmer population, and challenges to succession planning, access to local food, and there are many, many other examples. But before I continue, I would like to describe what a network is. Since I am talking about the food system, I want to give a quick definition. And I quote, "A food system is an interconnected network of practices, processes, and places that cover all aspects of food, from production through to processing, distribution, consumption, and finally waste management." The food system comes in many sizes, from the global food system that we are all familiar with, to the local or regional food system, which is what our work has been focused on. At the local regional level, it is the interconnected relationships between all of these different components of the food systems that make it profitable, healthy, and resilient. So what is a network? Networks are made up of, and I quote Plaster and Taylor, a set of nodes or points connected by links or pathways. Sorry, next slide. These nodes or points can be individuals, groups, or organizations, and the links or pathways are the ties, the relations between the actors. Curtis Ogden describes the purpose of networks are for actors to come together to create larger impact. Networks increase collaboration and are held together by shared values with members working on a collective goal. A network has 3 different phases, all of which are needed for the network to work successfully. At the foundation is connectivity. First and foremost, you need to connect individuals, groups, and organizations to enable the flow of resources and information. Next is alignment, which is how network members come together around a common set of goals. And finally, productivity, how network members work together to make things happen. Next slide. Now, I am going to share with you the story about how a group of food system stakeholders, including myself, became involved in a project to build a network. It became known as Land to Table, which eventually led me to start my master's degree at UBCO. The origins of the story come from my concerns with the sustainability of the food system and our communities in the North Okanagan. It starts with when I moved back to the region to work in the organic sector and pursue a community economic development program. In one of the social change courses, we were required to further build our relationships in the community and host a study circle. I was particularly interested in the concept of collective impact and how it was applied in Vermont and whether it could be applied in the North Okanagan. In November 2015, I gathered around a kitchen table with 3 other women who's Mary, and then there's two of the other women are actually on the call today, all of whom are connected to farming families in the region. Vermont's food system has been transformed by increasing collaboration. It is a well-known case study that demonstrates the significant improvements that can occur in the economic, environmental, and social aspects of a network approach. After gathering regularly, our study circle organized a meeting of key North Okanagan food system stakeholders. One thing they expressed was that they had enough consultations and want to see action. They suggested looking back at all the consultation documents and writing a summary report. After writing the report, the group of North Okanagan stakeholders suggested hosting a forum. The first forum was about the economic challenges. We decided to focus on the local food economy first on the recommendation of experts from Vermont, who said you need to get your farmers and other food system enterprises on their feet before they can turn their attention to the environmental and social issues. Next slide, please. After the first forum, we formed the Land to Table network, and I began my master's research related to the formation of the network. Like other successful networks, we are undertaking specific priority actions while simultaneously developing the network. They reinforce each other as people come together when there is something to be done, and that helps build the network further. My master's focused on building the network work, and we received a grant to hire our first network coordinator, Liz, to support the priority actions work. It seemed timely to take stock of this new network to figure out how to best develop it in the years to come. As a member of the Land to Table Steering Committee, it felt natural to me to do this work with the community, which is why my research aim was to facilitate a group of stakeholders to further strengthen their regional food system network. It was a natural fit for me to adopt a community-based participatory research approach. I worked closely with the Community Advisory Committee to ensure this master's would be relevant for the community. Two methods were customized for the purpose of this research. One, which I called participatory network mapping, was developed to map the current state of the Land to Table food system network and analyze its strengths and weaknesses. And the other, called the Build the Network framework, was a series of 14 questions aimed at developing recommendations for building the network to look at how we can build it to become more connected, aligned, productive, and healthy. In conclusion, this research methodology proved effective in engaging stakeholders to further strengthen the North Okanagan food system network by first analyzing its strengths and weaknesses, and secondly, developing a set of recommendations to build the network further. One of the outputs of this research was a report for Land to Table on recommendations for building a network. Next slide, please. Before I hand it over to Liz to share the last 4 years, I want to recognize the efforts from the Land to Table Steering Committee, Liz, Iser, and especially Mary. A lot of the work accomplished is because our hearts are in it and because of our personal networks. When we started this work, I was farming and working in a different position at Organic BC. The development of Land to Table has been due to trust in the community and a great number of supporters with lived experiences and the urgency for change. The producers involved at the start were from the organic community, and I now work at Organic BC because I respect its grassroots history, its principles and leadership, and that it is a growing network of farmers, ranchers, processors, and consumers who have been working together to sustain healthy ecosystems, build fair relationships, and recognize the complexity and interconnectedness of our world. In my role at Organic BC the past few years, and my direct connection to farmers, I continue to witness the challenges faced by those working in the food system and the resiliency amongst farmers that were impacted by the heat wave, drought, fires, and floods last year, and including the supply chain. It's networks like Land to Table and Organic BC that have relationships across commodities, scales, and communities that can, through collaboration and coordination, make change happen. And that's it. I was just going to mention, because I prepared this presentation for the history of Land to Table, I did not include Organic BC's role, but we've collaborated with Iser over the last couple of years as well. And we've done some great projects with our conferences and podcasts and video series. And then it was just great listening to your presentation and Andy's because of the correlation between all of our work.
Definitely, thank you.
Thank you.
Wonderful, thank you so much. I really appreciate that because I didn't know the history of Land to Table, even though I lived in Vernon for quite some time. And so it's really nice to get that back. Now, are you showing up on there, Liz?
Or is it just donuts?
Is it just donuts?
I know, that's
Okay,
good. Shift the donuts.
All right.
Okay, now we shift to Liz.
Yeah. Okay. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. It's really fun. This is really fun. To present alongside Eva-Lena and Mary, and have the opportunity to reflect on the work that we've done as a network over the past 4 years, but then also to compare with Rebecca and Andy, our counterparts across the pond. So thank you, Iser, for this opportunity. I'm Liz Blakeway. I'm the Network Director for Land to Table. I've grown a lot in this role over the last 4 years. It's really fun to see those photos of the early stages. I personally grew up in the Kootenays. I'm also from a farming family, one generation removed. We visited my mom's family's farm when I was a kid every other weekend. And I actually began my career on the waste management side of the food system, looking at food waste programming and policy development, but was always interested in systems change. And I currently live on a 3-acre Wilby farm just outside of the North Okanagan with my family. So continuing on from Eva-Lena, I'll share a little bit about what makes Land to Table a network, the vision and mission that guides our work, and the approach that we take that's led us to successes, as well as current challenges that we face. And I'll share a couple of examples of the projects that we're working on, as well as some next steps and key questions that we're asking as a network. Next slide. So Land to Table is a regionally based food system network made up of actors and stakeholders from across our regional food system in the North Okanagan. Simply put, we understand a network to be a group of people and organizations coming together to work together as equal partners to achieve a common vision, purpose, and goals. And our vision is to build a thriving, healthy, just, and resilient regional food system in the North Okanagan. And what the Vermont Farm to Plate model illustrated to us is that a well-connected and coordinated network that's guided by common purpose can create meaningful and lasting impact in terms of systems change. Next slide. The approach that we take as a network really defines our function and our current structure. So in our approach, we're always looking to center support for small and medium scale farmers. And that's for a variety of reasons that Eva-Lena touched a bit on. But it's in part because we have a large number of small scale farms and organic farms in the North Okanagan who are facing significant challenges, but mainly because we can't have a strong local food system without strong and thriving local family farms. Our network approach focuses on 3 key functions. The first is to build a connected and coordinated network to reduce duplication of efforts and provide opportunity for relationship building and knowledge sharing, also to connect ideas and projects and provide consistent and effective communications across the food system. And then we're also working to strengthen our food system through action. And this means that we're undertaking time-bound projects that have support in terms of network interest and energy, partnership collaboration, and funding behind them. And then the third is capacity building. And this role has really taken shape through more recent work that we're doing in food security that we've undertaken in partnership with United Way BC as a key funder of ours. And they provide funding that allows us, in turn, to distribute funds to food security programs regionally, but also to support grant writing and offer coordination time that supports organizational capacity for others who are working in this realm. In addition, we're finding that we're also being asked to play a capacity building role in terms of helping to develop community land use and infrastructure access for local growers and processors, and that's for projects that are in really early stages of development currently. Next slide. So I think it's important here to talk a little bit about the structure of our network. Currently, we are not a registered nonprofit society or charity on our own, but rather we are administratively and fiscally hosted by another organization. So for example, since March 2021, we've been hosted by the Social Planning and Research Council of BC, or SPARC BC. And SPARC is a registered federal charity who receives and administers funding on our behalf, and who also allow us to access funding that we wouldn't otherwise be eligible to receive. Land to Table is guided by a steering made up of key partner organizations such as UBCO and ICER. We've got Organic BC, Ministry of Agriculture. We've had Young Agrarians as a part of our steering committee, as well as local farmer representation. interior health and community futures. So these individuals lend a lot of credibility and robustness to the work that we're doing, and they're also participating as project partners in the work, in the projects. And our funding comes from a variety of sources. We currently rely on, but largely local and provincial based funding. We currently rely heavily on project funding, and this is in part due to the fact that there is limited funds available to cover operational costs like staff time. I'll talk about that again in a moment. Next slide, please. In the 2021 to 22 kind of fiscal period, Land to Table for the first time completed about 10 different projects in partnership with a variety of groups and different food system actors. And from that work, there are two really clear project streams that are emerging for us. And these include supporting market access across a food value chain, so from farm to table. And this focuses on connecting local small to medium scale producers to larger markets. So similar to what Andy was speaking about. And a key project in this stream includes a partnership with UBCO, where we have connected the university to a local farmer aggregator who's pooling products from several farms, small scale farms, in order to meet the volume requirements to supply the university's needs. And Mary will elaborate a little bit more on the co-creation elements and details of that project. And then the second stream of work that's really clearly emerging for us through funding, it is community food security. So through funding that allows us to hire a food security coordinator, this work includes partnership development with key local food security program providers. And the focus with partners is to increase the amount of local food that they can offer through program delivery in a way that's mutually beneficial to the organization, community members, and the farmers. Next slide. And I think that's a good segue into our network successes. Over what was a very extreme year in terms of climate events and ongoing pandemic impacts, we've clearly observed, one, that part of the value of being a network is the ability for us to be nimble. And in that sense, we have been able to undertake projects that respond to the priorities and the rising needs of the network. And there were two key projects that really highlighted our ability to have impact in this way. The first was an online election event that we called Eat, Think, Vote, that we undertook in collaboration with Food Secure Canada. And that was designed to draw in federal election candidates, local federal election candidates, for a conversation about our food systems and the gaps, opportunities, and needs there. And the other project that really demonstrated our nimbleness and ability to respond to the network was a meat drive fundraiser that we did with the Okanagan Indian Band, whose community was severely impacted by wildfire last year, to the extent that many community members lost their freezers and refrigerators that had stored meat supplies, food supplies. Also, their only grocery store burned down. And so we raised $8,000 in funding to purchase meat from local farmers who were also impacted by road closures and supply chain disruptions due to extreme flooding that same year. In addition, we worked with the Okanagan Indian Band and the Good Food Box to provide greater food security over that winter season, in particular through monthly food hampers. Another key success for us is really just in the development of very strong and important partnerships, where we've been able to undertake some really great projects that have had really great impact and results, and create potential for ongoing collaboration with those key partners. And then another key point to mention is that we do continue to find funding despite the fact that that is an ongoing challenge. Funders are recognizing the value in this work, and we're building longer term relationships with them rather than just accessing one-off funding. Next slide. But with successes also come challenges. So key challenges for us include some growing pains. So as we continue to grow as a network, which includes increasing the number of staff that we are needing to support the work that we're doing, we're kind of growing out of our hosting agreements that we have in place. And so while we think that this hosting partnership agreement has a lot of potential for us to continue to function as a network, we're uncertain if a hosting structure is sustainable for us in the long term. And of course, this is leading us to ask questions whether we should become our own nonprofit society, whether we even have the opportunity to become a charitable organization. We're also realizing that with few funding pots available in BC to draw from for this work, we're aware that we may be approaching a time where we're competing with our host organization for the same funding pots, same funding streams. And also there's limited funding available to begin with, especially when it relates to operational funds in terms of staffing, but specifically to fund our time to simply build the network, build relationships, and do that engagement side of the work, which is so critical to being able to do the project work. And maybe it goes without saying, but the pandemic continues to put a strain on us individually and on our communities in terms of illness and general COVID burnout and the ability for people to engage in this work. And then the last point to make is just that while we're growing fast, we are still a young network. And we might be having this challenge of needing to pace ourselves and be strategic about how we focus our energy, measure our impact, and partner effectively. And then my last slide is next. So to close up, we understand that food systems change requires that we address complex interconnected problems and address wicked questions. And we believe that a network approach that builds relationships first, aligns priorities and purpose, and co-produces solutions will allow for that systems change to create a more resilient local food system. Next steps for Land to Table include just continuing to build connections and alignment through project work and network engagement, continuing to build relationships with funders, and look for funding that can provide multi-year operational funds. We also this year want to undertake an organizational review and strategic planning to guide the direction that we continue to take. And we want to grow in our role as an advocate for food systems change, which includes the ability to affect food policy, which is not a realm we've entered into. So key questions that we're asking, what does the current regional food system need? And how does this inform our network structure and function going forward? How is the network model helping us achieve kind of key pillars of food systems change? And how do we structure a network organization that doesn't burn people out and that attracts a board rather than struggles to find board members? So maybe you can help us address those questions when we get to that question period. Thank you so much.
That was really wonderful. I love the way all of these things kind of build on each other, and you start to think of, some of the stuff you were talking made me think about questions for the earlier people that I didn't ask questions for, but it's really great. Thank you so much.
Almost like we planned it.
So our next speaker is Mary Stockdale, and I don't know how that's focusing on you yet.
Getting the slides. Well, I just want to say that, like Eva-Lena and Liz, I'm really enjoying and appreciating this symposium. And I want to thank Rebecca for actually giving us this opportunity to come together, both here and exchanging across the pond. It's really lovely. So I'm a professor here at UBCO in human geography, and I teach about the geography of the food system. And I'm also the daughter of retired organic sheep farmers in the North Okanagan, which is why I'm interested in the food system, especially from the farming perspective. And it was at our kitchen table, my family's kitchen table, that we all gathered for the study circle that started things off for Land to Table. And so I'm therefore one of the founders of Land to Table and am still connected to the network as a member of Land to Table's steering committee. So I've played a key role in the UBCO Land to Table partnership over these last 4 years. And I see myself as acting as a bridge between the university and the community. So today I'm going to talk about the role that a university can play in affecting social change. And I'm going to tell the story about how I, as well as a number of other UBCO partners, have leveraged our university positions and university resources to help to co-produce the Land to Table network and its many activities. I'm going to focus in particular on a recent project that has been a major boost for Land to Table and farmers in our food system network, and that's the UBCO Local Food Procurement Pilot Project. And then I'll conclude with some thoughts about the relationship we've developed so far. So, next slide, please. Better remember to do that. Yeah. So this slide shows the many individuals and groups in the university and community, including our funders, that have contributed to this partnership, this work. And a big one here is the Institute for Community Engaged Research, or ICER, of which I'm an affiliate member. And another big one is the UBC Food Services and its many wonderful staff who've gone the extra mile in the local food procurement pilot project. And there are a number of other great partners and funders, both at the university as well as in the community but beyond. And I hope I haven't forgotten any on that list. So next slide, please. So I'm going to have I've put together 3 slides, 3 tables that are a list of UBCO Land to Table collaborative activities. And they've taken place over 3 main phases, which are somewhat overlapping. And these include the network building phase, the food security phase, and the local food procurement phase. They're just ways of dividing this up, really, categorizing it. In each phase, the university partners have developed activities in support of Land to Table. So first, the network building actions. So we've heard about Eva-Lena's master's, which started things off for Land to Table with her work in mapping and building the food system network, which is really key. But there were also other student research projects that looked at key actors in the food system, such as Eric Douglas's survey of the region's food processors, or his study of the local food preferences of the region's consumers. And another student, Ty Sorensen, was hired to build a food system directory for one of our municipalities, the village of Lumbee. So this was all network building work. The second table, next slide, please, outlines the support that the university gave to Land to Table's food security stream of activities. But one major way was when an ICER's master student, Kelly Panchishan, was hired to work for Land to Table as their food security coordinator. Other smaller ways were when an undergraduate student, Renoir Gauvin, helped to write a grant application for the Okanagan Indian Band's food security work, or when Styliani Stavru helped advise the Good Food Box on a website redesign. So the third table, next slide, please, which I will show in a minute, will cover the different ways in which university partners supported the local food procurement project. But before I show you that, I would like to go into a quick overview of this project, as it is really the crown jewel of the university community relationship, and I just included that because, yeah, other side of the pond people. So first of all, the context for this project. As Eva-Lena and Liz have mentioned, the North Okanagan has a relatively high number of small-scale organic farms, many of which are struggling against a number of market access barriers. And they've long been asking for support to access larger, relatively stable wholesale markets, as our regional farmers markets are pretty saturated in terms of sales. So specifically, regional farmers have been asking for an institutional champion to step up and commit to trialing the purchasing of food from local small-scale farmers. So Land to Table Network was ideal for providing a connection to local growers and has also played a key coordinating and project management role. But UBCO also was well positioned to become a regional local food procurement champion because it had just taken control over its own food services management in 2019 after its contract with the corporate food services provider, Aramark, ended. As a result of taking this control back, UBCO Food Services had developed a strong food vision and values that included the value of sourcing local seasonal food. And UBC's Climate Action Plan also, for 2030, commits the institution to creating a just and climate-friendly campus food system, and it recognizes local food procurement as a component of that. Next slide, please. So in 2021, Land to Table partnered with UBCO to pilot the procurement of local food at the new UBCO Pritchard Dining Hall. And this is a really nice hall that has kind of a buffet style serving, so that really lent itself well to this kind of nimble, whatever's coming through from farmers, let's put it out, sort of approach. So the goals guiding this project were to build relationships of cooperation and trust along a food value chain, from land to table farmers, processors, and distributors to UBCO Food Services and the campus community who eat the food. And the second goal was to develop an innovative model for institutional local food procurement on the strength of these relationships that can be scaled up over time to include wider networks of farmers as well as additional institutions in the Okanagan. The next slide. After year one of the pilot project, we were pretty happy with the outcomes. We have formed a strong advisory committee. We have secured $45,000 towards year one of the project. And we've procured 15,000 pounds of vegetables, 11,000 pounds of apples, 1,800 liters of apple juice, and 275 pounds of sockeye salmon from an indigenous supplier. In addition to food procured, we have also begun developing communications materials to share about the importance of local food to the campus community. We've created a map in Pritchard Dining Hall to showcase where the food is from, as well as a web page of the UBCO Foods on the UBCO Food Services website. And as a result of this success, Feed BC, which is a program of the Ministry of Agriculture, has offered to invest in the scaling up of this project to other institutions in the Okanagan, which will bring in more farmers, which is absolutely wonderful. So feedback from the farmers has been very positive. They have mentioned that the security from the UBCO sales has been extremely important to them given the uncertain times they've been experiencing with marketing their products generally. And the farmer who is acting as aggregator of food from the other small farms has even been encouraged by this project to invest in a packing house for receiving, processing, and distributing the food. And this is closing a really key gap in our local food value chain from farmers to campus consumers. Feedback from the university has also been positive. The head chef has really appreciated and raved about the quality of the local food, its flavors, its freshness. And there's also quite an exciting story that took place at the time of the large floods last November that wiped out the highways to Vancouver, cutting our global food supply and emptying our regional grocery shelves for a number of days. With reduced food on offer from the corporate food distributor, Cisco, the head chef asked our land to table farmers if they could supply more of their food to cover the shortfall, which they did. So the relationships developed as a result of this project had therefore increased the resilience of the university's food supply. So now let's return to our third and final table. Next slide, please. Outlining the support that the university gave to the land to table's local food procurement stream of activities. So Food Services worked initially with a local consultant, Andrea Gunner, to identify some food items to trial. At the same time, a student, Ty Sorensen, reviewed local food procurement programs at colleges and universities across North America, summarizing barriers as well as possible solutions. And after that is when UBCO Food Services embarked upon the pilot project, which was supported by further research from student Will Burkhead on how the university might better embed a set of values into the local food value chain, including values that are very important to students: environmental sustainability, social justice, and animal welfare. And that's an ongoing process. It's really interesting. And finally, ICER has set up 2 work-study students, Grace Kyle, who's been working on this over the summer, and the new student, Sierra Lamy, to work on campus as local food champions this coming academic year. inviting students not only to enjoy tasting the local food, but also to understand why procuring this food is so important. So that's the story, next slide, of the relationship between university and community so far, with some key conclusions being as follows. First, the opportunities that a university can provide are numerous, including the hosting of events like this symposium, leveraging funding, doing community-based research, supplying excellent people to go and work at Land to Table, and last but not least, acting as institutional champion in procuring local food. Land to Table in return has been an amazing partner for supporting the community-based research projects, for helping with experiential teaching and learning, for sourcing amazing good local food, and even providing additional food security in times of crisis. The constraints of such a relationship exist as well. The research is done through students, which can mean variable quality and a short time span for doing the work. The funding that is secured is mostly for research, not network administration, coordination, or communications, which is what Land to Table really needs. And the collaborative work can also be a bit of a time waster for Land to Table staff like Liz, who are not paid for giving talks, appearing on panels, supervising our students, etc. So thank you, Liz.
No, you can't back out of it.
You can go.
But the key lesson, however, is that a university partner can really add value in the building of a food system network, as well as in the implementation of its ongoing activities, although this relationship has its limits. So that's our talk. Eva-Lena spoke about the building of the network, Liz about the activities of the network, including both the food procurement, food security streams, and I talked about how the university can support both the network building and also these activity streams. So thank you very much.
So I can shift over here and see if there are any questions. Thank you so much, Mary.
For the record, I'm not complaining.
Okay, so we've got time for questions now. So if anyone has a question, put up your hand. Oops. Perfect timing, right? It was really something quite interesting. I just wanted to comment on that. Maybe you might comment on. The place you're talking about is distinctly different from here, where UBCO is. And North Okanagan is a different geoclimatic zone, and it has different kinds of inequalities. I mean, I always think of Kelowna as one of the most unequal places in Canada because of the weirdness of pro golfers, pro hockey players, pro cyclists, and then working people making $30,000 a year and having to be in a housing market where the average house price is $1 million. So it's kind of weird, and that might be something you might comment on about what's the possibility to bring the Land to Table model further south in the Okanagan Valley. Like, have you managed to get organic farmers here in Kelowna into that network?
Yeah, good question. Not yet, but like I think I said in the presentation, I think we're still pretty young, and the focus has been on the North Okanagan in part because we were receiving funding from our regional district to focus on North Okanagan economic development and community food security. But I think it makes sense that we do start to broaden our scope in terms of the farmers that we're including, and that goes for the Shuswap area as well, right? There's a number of farmers there. They're all trying to access similar markets. And so, yeah, I think it makes sense, both in terms of economic development and in terms of community food security, to be expanding some of the work that we're doing.
Yeah.
I would just add that from the UBCO vision and values perspective, they see local food as being anything produced within the Okanagan bioregion. And so that bioregion includes the south and the center and the North Okanagan. So I think that when they're thinking about their local food procurement, that's where they would want to go.
Yeah. It's interesting. It seemed like there were some coincidences and serendipities. The contract ended. I mean, there's been a long fight at UBCO to get rid of Aramark, which is the largest producer of prison food in the United States, and produced food of the similar quality here at UBC. So students didn't like it, and they managed to get licenses from Starbucks and all these sort of other places to make it not look like it was Aramark. And then they had this kind of we had all sorts of problems with unionization drives here
Yes.
as well. And it seems like all of a sudden the university just changed its mind, and you must have had a lot to do with that. I mean, people inserting ideas about how it could be differently.
I think
Right.
we did complain a lot about Aramark. We
Yeah.
railed against it from our little perspective, but I think it was kind of, there's been a lot of support from the head of food services at UBC Vancouver, and there's been much more long-term kind of lobby about local food procurement, and they've already are way ahead of us in Vancouver, probably because they have that land and food systems group there.
And a farm.
And a UBC farm. So they kind of were so encouraging, and I think maybe we're partly behind the eventual, once the contract came up, encouragement or support of UBCO to just get out of Aramark and take control. Yeah.
Right. There's more answers and questions, so go ahead.
Yeah, no, I'm really, it's great to hear all the presentations. I'm really sort of fascinated and so excited about the parallels we have, and I'd like, this time in the discussion to talk more about the Denver Food Partnership as well that I'm part of. But yeah, I'm really trying to do the same as you in the University of Exeter. I've been sort of trying to bang the table. Well, no, I'm trying to encourage discussion around sustainable procurement, and we've got such, a rich, like Andy was saying, we've got such a rich opportunity with the local farmers. But and also the university, after the declaration of climate emergencies, we have a 2030 climate strategy.
It's the same.
Yeah.
Amazing.
It's the same. So I really would like to see that change. But I've had these conversations with Andy and Martin Bragg, who's really key. He's a horticultural organic farmer on the outskirts of Exeter, and a really key thinker who sort of helps me to understand the agricultural system better. But I think their feedback was they looked at the numbers and thought it may not be that financially rewarding if they were setting up the food hub to sort of really prioritise on food procurement. So I wondered if you could say a little bit more about the benefits from the farmer's side about the procurement project.
Yeah, where to begin? So part of the work that we're doing this coming year with support from FeedBC is to do a market feasibility study to get a sense of what is the demand from institutions, including health institutions and colleges as well as UBCO, and then to what extent can our local fruit and vegetable farmers, to start with, that's the products we're going to focus on, meet that demand. The idea is that institutions provide a stable market. Institutions have a sense of how many people they're feeding over the course of the year. The challenge is that the academic year doesn't coincide with the growing year, and so that reduces supply for fresh produce to some extent. So a lot of storage vegetables will be going into supply. Although that shifted a bit this year, we trialed the use of fresh produce in the catering of events that occur on campus during the summer months. But for our farmer aggregator, he has said he doesn't have a problem in growing the food. They can grow the food, and their other small-scale farmer counterparts are growing the food. They're looking at building the infrastructure to pack and distribute that food, but they need the commitment from the institutions. And so what we need to understand is what is a realistic amount that they can purchase, and are they willing to commit to purchasing that? And so the work that we're going to be doing this fall and winter with other institutions is building relationships with them and connecting relationships with our UBCO chef, who knows the challenges and constraints, especially around cost, to help walk them through what the different opportunities are for that local food procurement. That answer the question? Yeah. Okay.
Just a brief comment. Is Michelle, I'm going to step out, but I don't know if she's still on.
No, she's
not. Okay. Michelle Sasumi, who was on the call, she was our coordinator for our last conference. Organic BC hosts a conference, an annual conference every year, and worked closely closely with John on that. But unfortunately, we had to move it all online. But initially, it was planned to be at Thompson Rivers University in Kamloops. And one of our policies is for all our annual conferences, we have a big banquet, and all the food is from organic producers. And so we always have to build a relationship with the hotel in whatever region we are that we can do that because of their limitations. And Michelle managed to work with TRU so that they are changing their policies and access the same product from organic producers. Great.
And they have a entire food program there as well.
Yeah.
I have a quick question as well. Building on Lawrence's point, and I kind of took this a little bit from Andy's piece, or it might have been Rebecca's piece as well. But I think we have this interesting sort of geographic schism within the Okanagan. We sort of imagine it as this one singular entity, but in fact it's not. I mean, I feel like almost it's a watershed when I drive to work from Vernon to Kelowna every morning. I sort of cross a watershed, and suddenly we're in the land where, in fact, we're not really producing a lot of locally sourced food. Of course, there are instances, but there's this mass transformation taking place within agriculture in the south and central Okanagan, which is moving more towards cash cropping. So we see orcharding slowly moving into wine. We're seeing the introduction of large, like industrial scale lettuce production. Obviously, cherries are an absolutely huge thing. And ultimately, this is all for an export market. And I was intrigued by Rebecca saying as well that, in fact, the sort of high quality produce produced at an organic scale, it's not necessarily being produced for a domestic or a local market, but in fact it's being shipped off to London and other places because it can command a much higher price. And so I wonder about this sort of tension between sort of more broadly sort of organic production, a local procurement, but also transformation, why people engage with agriculture, the industrial side of agriculture, and whether there's a space for sort of small scale within that. And that's really a question for Andy to bring you into the conversation, Rebecca, as well as for Land to Table as well.
Yeah, it's a dichotomy that is, I know a lot of small farmers, but a lot of small farmers don't want to stay small. They want to, be large enough to have a week off every now and again and employ, and replace themselves. And it's always going to be that tension between being small and inefficient, but selling your produce for a high value. And then the minute you go up to another scale, you're then supplying a wholesale market. So you lose a third of the retail price. And before you know it, you then need to go up in scale by 20% to cover those costs. And it's how we've ended up with the system that we've got. And I realise I live in a bit of a dream world that I can square that circle. But I think right now it's connecting the people of Exeter to the soil around them has got to be part of the mission, and a lot of the value that those farmers bring will be allowing people access to their land more often. I think that has to be the deal. That if you buy, if the people spend more buying local food, that they end up having some gain from that. There's got to be a quid pro quo, really. I don't know how we do that quite, but lots of ideas. And Rebecca mentioned Carolyn Steele's book, and it goes into quite a lot of detail on the benefits of people having access to land. So I think that's one aspect that we need to bring in.
Yeah, that's great, Andy. Yeah, and also all the conversations. I don't know if they can hear me down. Yeah.
I'll just move this closer.
All the conversations I've had with Andy and Martin, and the conversations Andy, Martin, and other people from Food Exeter and their network have been having over the last year or so about the food hub, just goes to show the number of local farmers who would be really interested in boosting the local supply chain. So that's something Andy was talking about. I think I've been talking to other colleagues at Exeter, like Stefan Boehm. We had a great funding bid around food procurement in Devon, and we got some really big anchor institutions on board, including the university, but we weren't successful in the bid. So, you know, that sort of burnout over, and that was our second go at that sort of bid. So that gets very frustrating. But also, I was just going to mention as well, I think the sort of relationships, going back to our sort of key theme here around networks, the relationships between producers and like local policymakers are so sort of vital. So it's great that you've been able to sort of bridge that here. And I'm just sort of aware of the great work going on around Bristol. They have the Bristol Food Network and the Bristol Food Policy Council, but they're so sort of embedded with the local council. They have that sort of close relationship is really sort of supporting the sort of the thriving development of that network, and that's also going on. That's been going on for a long time around Brighton and Hove, Food Cardiff. There's some really exciting examples of how things can be. And there's also a drive since the declaration of climate emergencies. There's a big sort of conversation in the UK about sustainable food procurement. So it will be really, I'm really hopeful that that conversation will actually achieve in tangible outcomes rather than just conversations.
I do see that Elaine put her hand up and she made a comment.
There's 3 people with hands up, so.
Great to hear from her as an organic producer of the North Okanagan.
Yes. Well, I wondered if Andrea wanted to comment to Elaine and
Okay, we've got 3 people with
We've
hands
got
up.
questions,
So I'm putting names on there, sorry.
Elaine is in the middle there.
Okay, shall we?
Well, there's this gentleman here first.
Okay,
So
Richard.
that will be Richard.
So Richard, if you could ask your question.
Yes, thank you. So I'm attending here from Montreal. I'm associated with a business in Kelowna, BC. So that's part of the reason that I'm here. I'm also have lived in the UK, and so I do know the areas there, Exeter and Bristol, and visited some of the people there, transition towns, and all kinds of very, I would say, grassroots kind of movements in the UK are very exciting, you know, and I think I have a lot to learn from these initiatives in the UK. So it's all very interesting. Myself, what I do is I'm an inventor. Actually, I have been engaged in the food sector for a long time, all my life, and so I focus on controlled environment agriculture. Now, I know that this community and often in these circles, you know, you're looking at organic and rather traditional farming, but what this is about is 21st century farming, and well, we have innovation, and I think innovation is not being well supported actually in the agricultural sector. When we produce in a closed environment with this innovative technology, we're able to operate at a 0 carbon footprint, and you know we're not relying on fossil fuels, which of course do go into even organic farming because it's mechanized. And organic farming around the world is mechanized, and yet we see only about 2.5–3% market penetration, and we see a lot of the farmers also struggling. When we go into a controlled environment production, it's all electrified. You know, there's no tractors, there's no engines, there's no requirement for fossil fuel. And, you know, with our approach, we use, it's a solar energy heating and cooling process. So again, it's about innovation, and also in these controlled environments, we can have a high level of productivity. So we have a smaller footprint. We do grow vertically as well, and we do encourage aquaponics, which is a combination of fish farming and crops, plant crops production, and it makes quite a beautiful synergy, which of course is very natural, between the production of the carbon dioxide and the consumption. So I just wanted to bring up that because it's very suitable for small operators, and we have hubs and we have teams around the world, and as I say, we're located in Kelowna, and we'd very much like to engage, and would like to engage with the university as well. We've had quite a bit of engagement in Europe as well. So we can connect also teams that are doing innovation through international collaboration. The technology is open source, so it's intended for DIY even, and we do have small farmers also implementing technology. But it's challenging to do this, and so it would be great to have more academic interest, and that would be wonderful. To connect more.
You could pop some contact details in the chat.
I did, yeah. I did put contact details.
To Elaine.
Hi.
Go ahead.
Oh, hi. Thanks. I found Andy's talk really interesting. Now I listened to everybody else. I've lost my thread a little bit, but I just think scale is from a producer end of kind of trying to of producing for a local scale is crucial, and producing the food producing the crops in the field is one thing, but a lot of kind of for vegetable production is actually kind of materials handling. So like Liz was saying, is like developing handling facilities and kind of scaling up. I think there's a lot of potential for scaling up towards for relationships like with the university and with retailers rather than the big wholesale scale. But I think just producers starting from the beginning to aim at a particular medium scale is crucial, because if you haven't got the capitalization to start, the only way you can start as a producer, and there's a lot of is a certain small scale, that then you're stuck in a certain way of accessing the system. Anyway, that was I just wanted to quickly make that more. Oh, and one thing that really strikes me is knowing a little bit the West Country a little bit and having lived here. I think there's lots of similarities, but I was really curious about, I think the Kelowna is such a different place from Exeter, and I think that kind of, obviously not everybody in Kelowna is wealthy, but that wealth and some there's a history of, and I'm not knocking, it's great, you can be a small scale producer, and historically I think there's some small scale salad and vegetable production that then you could get to the city of Kelowna and get a good price, and that's different from producing a lot of scale of food and getting them into the stores and I think that's a little bit different situation from the Exeter. Anyway, thanks a lot. Oh, and also we have an electric tractor. Thanks. That's what I was going to say. Yeah.
Yes, Andrea, can you hear?
Thank you. Yes. Thank you. This has been really interesting. I especially enjoyed Andy's and Rebecca's presentation, but also to see Eva-Lena and Liz and Mary on a panel has been really fun. Like Elaine, the thing that really struck me is the importance of scale. And when I was first approached by the new executive chef at UBCO to supply them with, I'm a poultry farmer, to supply them with poultry, from a scale perspective, it was well within our production level to be able to supply UBCO, which is crazy because we are non-quota growers, we're specialty permit growers. Where I had the idea that actually what we need to do is try and help UBCO find a bunch of local producers was because what UBCO, what the executive chef was wanting was probably 25% of our production. We have 1,000 households that we supply throughout the Thompson Okanagan. To take 25% of our production and put it into UBCO just did not make sense for us. And so talking to the food staff and figuring out what volumes they were actually doing, my suggestion at the beginning was to take what the University of Toronto did, which to say to their food procurement people, let's try and replace 10% of your product purchases with local and then build from there and build at 5 to 10 to 20% a year. University of Victoria did the same model, and that's worked really, really well for them. What they've been able to do within 3 or 4 years is get up to 75% of their purchases being from local producers. But to start where the scale works for producers like Elaine and Patty or Emily and Owen, where it's not taking all of their product, but it's taking a portion of their product and they can build on that market. It's absolutely crucial because farming is a investment. It's an investment in time and energy and capital, and you have to make sure that that capital and that investment is going to be returned. And you can't do that by taking on risky ventures if it's your own money you're playing with. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone have any comments on anyone from the panel?
I just kind of carrying on from what Rebecca was saying with John's question in terms of that relationship building. I think one of the things that Land to Table is able to do as we start kind of step by small step with these projects is to offer that coordination time to liaise between, to be the person who's talking to both the executive chef and the farmer so that they're not always having to put the time into doing that. So bridging the gap between the two in order to make sure that supply is going smoothly and that everyone knows what's going on and that need is met. And I think that to start, that coordination time is really needed and helpful. And then the relationships are there and they'll carry on their way on their own.
When you're describing that, I'm thinking, wow, that's a lot of sleepless nights. You can't screw up as a coordinator.
Right? Speaking 2 languages.
Yeah, I have learned a lot over the last year, and it's not every detail. Like the farmer and the chef still sit down together and talk about the products that are needed and the price points and all of that. I'm not interjecting in every single detail. But just to kind of keep the project moving along and making sure that challenges and issues are addressed as they come up and keeping communication channels open, I think, has helped.
I wanted to talk a bit about, I think, the campus side of things more generally just about how sobering the experience has been of having our shelves empty of food, not just from COVID, but from floods and fires. And I think it's easier to persuade people right now that we need to have resilient regional food systems and that we need to have options, because I think people have been so oriented to, let's just get the cheap and convenient local food. Why would we bother with this, more expensive global food, and why would we bother with this local food? But I think now they can see, having been through these experiences, the value of having multiple options, global and regional, and supporting them and putting our heads together to think, how can we have this and move? There's sort of a quote I really like that says we need to move from an efficiency perspective to a resilience perspective. And a resilience perspective is having options, multiple options to draw from. One year you need the regional food supply, the next year you need the global food supply because both might fail. So to do that, I think we need to put our heads together, and that's where the network comes in. And I just wanted to also say we need to educate our consumers, because sometimes this local food will cost more. Sometimes maybe it won't, but we need to keep it alive. So sometimes we're going to pay more for it. We need to persuade people, and students, like with the local food procurement project, students are key, because students will either be saying, why are we buying local? That could cost more, and we don't, we can't afford it. Or they can be saying, buy local because we love what those local farmers do for the environment, for the community, and for our health. So it's a lot of like that. I just wanted to welcome our 2 local food champions we've got in the room here, who are students, who are going out and talking to students and persuading them and educating them of what's going on in the world and how important it is to have this resilience perspective. But even wider, right? All consumers, I think, need to raise awareness.
Yeah, that's really fascinating to hear about how that approach has developed here. And I absolutely love how you're working with students as partners in this project. I'm involved in the new masters at Exeter. That again is trying to students are doing really impactful projects alongside external partners. So again, it'd be great to talk further about perhaps some of these other synergies on the teaching front, and how this I love this integrated approach where we're researching, teaching, and acting, or actioning all at the same time. And I think that's really, really, really valuable. If there was time, I just wanted to say just a very quick, it didn't come out in my presentation, I just wanted to say just in a couple of minutes how we've had over the last year and a half, we've set up in Devon the Devon Food Partnership, and I'm really glad that we've got Stella, who's a member of the steering group, is on the call. I'm waving at Stella. Hi, Stella. So Stella's a really key player and set up the Dartmoor Community Kitchen and is doing absolutely incredible work helping to support people in need, accessing good food in Devon. But just to say, I think again, the time of emergencies, like Mary was saying, does also produce opportunities for us to show how we do have some answers or do have some tools that can help address these issues. So I think, again, the declaration of climate emergency in Devon in 2019 coincided with when I released the report from our Devon Sustainable Food Networks research, and by some nice synergies, it has led to the setting up of the Devon Food Partnership, which is supported by Devon County Council. We've got members from across the food system represented on the supply chain, on the steering group. So it'll be, it's early days for us. We're just in the process of devising a food strategy for Devon. But the fact that we're already linked with the policymakers gives me a lot of hope that perhaps this will be a vehicle to perhaps accelerate change.
I think that's probably a good moment.
Great. Do you want to say anything?
Yeah, I know. It just closes down quickly. I just wanted to take this opportunity to really thank all of our panelists and also our audience as well. Wonderful questions. Thank you for your excellent presentations. I mean, I can't help but think that really there's a lot of opportunity for us to think about how we can start to align the sorts of initiatives going on in Devon together with the initiatives here in the North Okanagan. And I really hope that this symposium, and also having Rebecca over here, hearing from Andy, seeing Stella, this will provide the sort of impetus that we need to sort of expand out our ideas, to share, from the source of innovations going on in both places, and start to build more resilient food systems into the future. So once again, many, many thanks. I'd also quickly like to take this opportunity to thank Lawrence for moderating. Thanks very much for being here. I'd also really like to thank Jo. She's hidden away, squirreled away in the back there. But Joanne Carey has really been instrumental in supporting the relationships, but also instrumental in actually putting this symposium together today as well. So once again, many thanks everyone for being here, for being a part of this, and I hope that this is the beginning of a long and fruitful relationship in the future.